from America's finest city. This is Real Talk San Diego on ESPN 1700.
What's happening, gang? You are back live in the Secret Stash, hanging out with some of the coolest local people, talking about some important local stuff, tracking down some stories along the way with the singular focus of leaving you a little better than how we found you. I'm your host, Jesse Ibanez, co-founder of the Greenhouse Group, helping folks get into and out of homes right down here in the heart of San Diego and moving those folks with purpose. That's our game. And germane to that game, in the studio today, we're flanked by a local superstar. I'm going to call you that right out of the gate, Rick.
Flattered.
Richard L. Boyer, Law Office of Richard L. Boyer. Here's why Rich is in the studio today. Well, first of all, I'll do you a second solid, Rich. This guy is what, AV rated, right? I think the Martindale Hubble gang out
That's
there,
right.
which is, I think, the highest rating you can get for your discipline. SD Mag, 5-star real estate lawyer for what, the last, how many years?
Well, I've lost track, but
Yeah, you're right.
let's say the last several.
That's all you need to say.
Right.
Just lost track, ... That says the rest. And then I think Avo.com's got you almost the highest rating you could have. It's like 9.8 out of 10 or something, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the 9.8, the reason why you didn't get the 0.2 is because your mom hasn't voted for you.
I have a call into her right after the show.
No, but as you can tell, though, obviously very excited to have Rick in the studio today. And the reason why is that there seems to be a couple themes that continually brew up in Rick and I's specific domain, helping folks get into and out of homes. And then perhaps, Rick, I would add on to that, figuring out how to get through the stuff when the you-know-what hits the fan, right? And that's obviously where you come in and play a huge role. But specific to that, though, man, vacation rentals, right, all over the map right now. Also, something else I want to hit with you over the next hour is a couple things. Maybe if you can leave us with a story or two in your not-too-distant past about, like, things to look out for to make sure that the seller's not frauding you. This is big right now. A lot of transactions locally. We'll kind of get into the integrated complexity of that. And then what for, like failure to disclose items will kill your next purchase if you're not careful about it.
That's right.
Sure. Does that sound fun? We got the gloves on?
You bet.
Well, good. Why don't you start off by just introducing yourself real quick? Let people know who we're hanging out with.
All right, Jesse. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I am a local real estate lawyer. I primarily focus on litigation matters, which doesn't necessarily mean lawsuits, but it does involve handling disputes for my clients. Sometimes we get them early and we resolve them early, but if they have to resolve into a dispute or dissolve into a dispute, I guess we should say, we take those and we get them resolved for our clients and take them to a conclusion and try to do it in a satisfactory way for the clients.
And what a breadth of knowledge and experience you're bringing into this conversation right now to take that level of depth and then bring it all the way up to the superficial, timely nature of what it seems like is most popular for everybody right now, which is the whole vacation rental thing. So can we kind of tip on this a little bit?
You bet. Yeah, and it is very timely and controversial, not only here in San Diego, but all over the state of California. I know the state of Washington is dealing with this as well. Just about any place where vacationers want to go. Condos on the beach and on the bluffs here in San Diego's North County are dealing with whether there ought to be limitations on the length of time that vacationers can stay in those renters, actually minimal limitations. The full-time owners and occupants of those condos have been complaining that short-term vacation renters are causing all sorts of problems. Whether right or wrong, what they're complaining about is parking issues, trash around the complex.
Partying.
That since they're there for such a short time and then they go home, they don't care. Mm-hmm. They don't care as much as a full-time occupant and owner would care. So they want to place limitations on the rentals, make them a minimum of 30 days. And this has become a huge controversy, as we said, and a lot of cities are dealing with it. A lot of condo complexes are dealing with it.
Now, here's what's, I think, interesting about this, and I love the frame that you brought up around this because, we've been seeing it in the news. We even talked about this on a previous show about the old lady up in North Park, right?
Right.
That was like trying to run an actual, literal bed and breakfast out of her spot.
Yeah. Just
so happened to be using Airbnb to get there, and everybody got up in arms about it. But the specificity around, like, you talked about HOAs. and you talked about the covenants and restrictions that are built into that. 30 days has always historically been the most liberal benchmark that you can find.
Right.
Right. And there's all kinds of other things too, right? Like you can't have a certain amount more of number of people in there at one time, and that's another big thing that happens a lot with the. We're talking, of course, about the VRBO, the Airbnb, Craigslist. Even you can get them on there.
You bet.
But now here's where the rubber hits the road, right? What if you were an owner, you had purchased, and you intended on doing this, right? And so, like, that was part of the reason why you paid what you paid in the first place, was because this was substantiating, the level of income that you were going to get. Yep. And then your neighbor then decides that they're going to take umbrage with this, and they try to retroactively pull you out of that and say, okay, well, now we're putting in and instituting a 30-day minimum requirement. So, like, what happens then?
Well, that's exactly where the conflict arises, because those owners who bought thinking they were going to get that rental income from vacation renters are all of a sudden in conflict with the people who don't want those vacation renters. So there's an issue about whether those property rights take precedence over the rights of the owners to have a quiet enjoyment of their unit and be able to live there without having to deal with transient owners next door and the problems that they claim they cause. Sometimes they actually do cause problems, but a lot of times we found that some of the claims are a little bit exaggerated, I guess I should say.
Imagine that.
Yeah. And so, so I found that some of the owners who have bought their units with the expectation that they're going to derive income and need the income from the vacation renters. So in some cases, just so they can pay their mortgages on that unit, right, and then be able to use their units a few times a year to stay by the beach.
Because they bought it under that pretense.
Exactly. It was legal when they bought it. It was in the CC&Rs that they could rent for a short period of time, meaning 7 days or less. And then all of a sudden they're faced with the prospect that they can no longer do that. So it's a big deal, and it's going to take money out of their pocket if those kinds of laws or rules get changed. So sometimes the cities are dealing with this issue because cities are they're finding, like the city of Pacific Beach and Mission Beach, cities of Pacific Beach and Mission Beach are having these issues, and they're dealing with them on a community-wide basis. We're finding it also just on condo projects, HOA-wide bases. So,
it's going to be on the ballot.
It's all over the place, and it's going to court. The courts are having to deal with it now to resolve some of these disputes.
Yeah, and they're finally starting to put some frameworks around to actually include this language specifically. And we're going to see this now be a heuristic that carries forward. But the challenge is, what do you do retroactively, right?
Right.
That's exactly why we got Richard Boyer. By the way, Richard Law, offices of Richard O. Boyer. You can catch him at Boyer Law. That's BOYERLAW.net.
Correct.
You can check him out in all of his wonder, and of course his brilliantly shining medals and different awards and stuff on there too. I love checking up on that for you. You mentioned Pacific Beach, Mission Beach. Now this is an interesting caveat because like all of the stuff on the ocean front there,
yes,
right? That's all short-term rental stuff, right?
So far, yes.
Well, for the most part, right? And so what is it about the rules? I'm just going to make this as generic as possible so you can enlighten us all about that, how that chunk of real estate behaves versus kind of slipping back into the neighborhoods a little bit.
Well, when people come to San Diego, they want to stay on the beach. They want to stay as close as they can to the beaches. We have beautiful beaches here, all the way up and down the coast in San Diego County and further north. But specifically here in San Diego County, they come from Arizona, they come from Nevada, they come from all over the country to stay at the beach in San Diego.
For less than 30 days.
Yeah, and most of the time they can't stay for 30 days. People have 1 week vacation or 2 week vacation. Yeah. If they're limited...
Have you seen how much those things cost?
Oh, I do. That's it. The cost is prohibitive, but also if they were to have to rent for 30 days, a lot of people just could not come.
Yeah.
And the California Coastal Commission is involved in this too for that very reason, because their policy is to encourage access to the beaches.
Right.
Access to the coast.
Access is a big word.
And if limitations are placed on these vacation rentals, then that means that less people can access the beaches because they can no longer afford to stay for 30 days or longer.
Right. So just generically, so how does that little chunk behave differently from the rest of the residential neighborhoods? Why is it okay there and not necessarily okay back where, Ma and Pa live?
Well, I think it's just a practical matter because you get fewer renters wanting to stay farther away from the beach, short-term renters, that is. But it's not exclusively limited to that coastal strip. Some of the neighborhoods with the residential, the single-family homes, are having some of these issues too, and we're starting to see it migrate not away from the beach a little bit further inland.
Yeah, because you mentioned HOAs. Well, what happens if it's a detached home?
Yeah, so there it's much more difficult for the neighborhood to develop it. And now it's got to become a zoning issue or a city issue. You can't simply go to the HOA and ask the HOA to change the CC&Rs or the rules and regulations.
Right. That's why we got my man, Richard Boyer, hanging out with us. By the way, you can catch Richard back at the office at 858-481-8757 if you've got any questions that come up for you about this topic or perhaps any of the ones that we're going to talk about next. So coming up, we're going to get to know Richard a little bit more. I think what I'm itching to find out is a little bit about his experience, because it's rare when you've got someone with such a depth and breadth of knowledge to bring into this conversation. But specifically, we're going to tear into what the two things you got to look out for to make sure the seller isn't frauding you on your next real estate transaction. Hanging out in the stash, Real Talk Radio San Diego. We'll be right back.